Have you ever wondered why some women seem to grow stronger, softer, and more radiant the longer they remain alone? Not lonely, but alone. There's a quiet kind of power in solitude that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention or validation. It simply exists, like a mountain wrapped in mist, untouchable, unbothered, and deeply alive in its stillness. In a world that teaches women to measure their worth by how much they are desired, solitude becomes an act of rebellion. It's not just being without someone, it's remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. The modern woman who thrives alone isn't heartless or detached. She's awake. She's the one who has felt the weight of disappointment, the ache of unmet expectations, and the emptiness that comes from chasing love without self-connection. At first, solitude feels like silence after the storm, unsettling. The absence of noise reveals how much of life has been filled with echoes of others. You begin to notice how often you've lived in response to someone else's needs, someone else's moods, someone else's version of love. There's an unease that comes when you finally stop seeking mirrors in others and instead turn inward. But this discomfort, this raw, unfiltered stillness, is the birthplace of power. Psychologists say solitude allows for emotional integration. Alan Watts might say it dissolves the illusion of separation. Both are right. When a woman stops running from her own company, she begins to see the contours of her soul, the subtle lines of her desires, her wounds, her strength. The loneliness that once haunted her becomes her teacher. It teaches her that fulfillment was never something to be found in another's arms, but cultivated in her own heart. And here lies the paradox. The woman who embraces solitude becomes the one everyone is drawn to, not because she needs them, but because she doesn't. Her energy no longer leaks through desperation or people-pleasing. Her eyes carry a stillness that speaks louder than words. She no longer confuses attention with affection or validation with value. Her love is no longer a currency. It's a gift. Men sense it instinctively. There's something almost unnerving about a woman who doesn't need to be chosen. The dynamic shifts. What once was pursuit turns into reverence. She's no longer trying to earn love. She embodies it. The kind of woman who sits alone in a cafe, content, unhurried, looking out the window with that serene half smile. She's not waiting for anyone. She's in communion with herself. And that is magnetic in a way that cannot be imitated. But this path isn't without pain. Solitude strips away illusions, and that can feel like loss. The fantasy of being completed by another dissolves, and what remains is the raw truth that no one is coming to save you. Yet it's in that realization that salvation begins. Freedom is born not in what you gain, but in what you release. You begin to let go of the need to be understood, the urge to explain yourself, the compulsion to prove your worth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." For a woman, that retreat becomes sacred ground. The more she learns to dwell there, the more she realizes that peace was never external. It's not found in validation or belonging. It's found in alignment. When her actions, emotions, and truth move in harmony, she becomes whole. And this wholeness changes everything. Her relationships evolve, not because she withdraws, but because she no longer participates in half-hearted connections. She no longer tolerates confusion disguised as passion or control disguised as care. The woman who thrives alone doesn't do so because she despises love, but because she understands it too deeply to settle for its imitation. In solitude, she discovers the alchemy of transformation. Each day she spends alone refines her, like fire refines gold. She learns that solitude isn't emptiness, it's spaciousness. It's the space where the divine feminine breathes freely, where her creativity unfolds, and where her softness becomes her strength. And perhaps the most profound shift happens quietly, when she realizes she no longer longs to be understood, only to be real, when her own presence becomes enough. That is the essence of empowerment, not dominance or resistance, but peace. So the next time you see a woman walking alone, headphones in, lost in thought, know that you are witnessing power in motion, not the power of performance, but of presence. She's not avoiding love, she's redefining it. And when she does love again, it will not be out of need, but choice. A love that begins in solitude is never desperate. It is deliberate. Because the woman who thrives alone is not alone at all. She is surrounded by everything she once tried to find in others. Peace, purpose, and her own heartbeat echoing softly in the quiet of her becoming. There comes a moment in solitude when the silence stops feeling heavy, when it begins to hum with life. It's subtle at first, like the sound of distant waves. You wake up one morning and realize that the ache has softened. The absence that once terrified you has become a kind of music. You no longer crave constant noise, constant messages, constant reminders that you matter, because you've begun to taste something deeper than reassurance. You've begun to taste peace. The empowered woman discovers that solitude is not the absence of love, but the presence of clarity. She sees how much of her past longing was rooted in fear. Fear of being unseen, unheard, unchosen. For years, she mistook attachment for intimacy, mistook consistency for care. But solitude clears the fog. It reveals how much of what she called love was really self-abandonment dressed in romance. In her stillness, she meets her younger self, the one who believed she had to earn love by shrinking, by pleasing, by staying quiet. She looks at that version of herself with compassion now, because solitude doesn't harden her. It softens her into truth. She begins to forgive herself for all the times she betrayed her intuition just to be wanted. She realizes that the woman who once begged for attention was never weak. She was just uninformed about her own power. This is where the psychological awakening begins. The nervous system, once addicted to chaos, begins to calm. The mind, once ruled by the loop of rejection and approval, begins to see patterns instead of people. She understands now that attraction without alignment is just chemistry, not destiny. She learns to differentiate between being desired and being respected, between someone liking her and someone seeing her. Solitude becomes her therapist, her mirror, her sanctuary. It teaches her to sit with discomfort without reaching for distraction. In a world designed to keep her scrolling, chasing, and comparing, that is nothing short of revolutionary. She realizes how silence reveals what noise hides, her true desires, her genuine voice, her unfiltered emotions. And in that quiet self-confrontation, she sees how often she has mistaken connection for control. She remembers relationships where love was conditional, where affection was currency, where attention was earned through compliance. But now she recognizes the difference between love that liberates and love that binds. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." The woman who thrives alone finally understands that this includes her. She doesn't need to be chosen to be worthy, nor busy to be fulfilled. She begins to experience the small joys, the taste of morning coffee, the warmth of sunlight on her skin, the sound of her own laughter echoing in an empty room. For the first time, she realizes that her presence, even when unobserved, has meaning. It's here that something mysterious happens. As she stops chasing validation, she becomes magnetic in a new way. The men she used to attract, the ones drawn to her wounds, her giving, her emotional labor, begin to fade away. In their place come those who meet her energy, not drain it. She no longer speaks the language of need. She speaks the language of peace. And not everyone understands that dialect, but those who do stay without effort. Yet the true beauty of this transformation isn't about finding someone better. It's about realizing she is no longer waiting to be found. Her worth is not a treasure buried for someone else to discover. It is the ground she walks upon. Every step she takes, every boundary she sets, every no that honors her energy, all of it is sacred. The Stoics taught that the only true control we have is over our own mind. She embodies this truth now. When her emotions rise, she doesn't suppress them. She witnesses them. When loneliness visits, she welcomes it as an old friend with lessons to share. When the past whispers, she listens without attachment. The noise of the world still surrounds her, but it no longer commands her. And perhaps the most profound shift happens when she realizes she doesn't need to be understood to be at peace. She used to explain her sensitivity, justify her boundaries, defend her independence. Now she simply exists, quietly powerful, unapologetically herself. People might call her mysterious, but what they're really seeing is self-possession. She has returned to herself, and in doing so, she no longer fits into the molds designed for women who doubt their worth. She doesn't play games, doesn't chase attention, doesn't argue for her place in someone's life. Her peace is too expensive to spend on confusion. Because once you've known your own company and found it beautiful, chaos loses its charm, and love, when it arrives, no longer feels like rescue. It feels like resonance. There's a quiet moment that arrives after healing, the kind of moment that doesn't make noise, but rearranges everything. It's when a woman realizes she's not just surviving her solitude anymore, she's thriving in it. Her solitude no longer feels like an empty room, it feels like a temple. Every breath becomes a prayer, every act of self-care becomes devotion. She begins to sense the sacredness in her own rhythm, her own pace, her own life. It's in this space that she learns the art of emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel deeply without drowning, to love fully without losing herself. The woman who thrives alone doesn't suppress emotion. She transcends its ownership. When sadness comes, she lets it move through her like a river through stone. When joy arrives, she lets it overflow without fear of it leaving. She understands now that emotions are visitors, not verdicts. For so long, society told her that her worth depended on how well she could love others, how nurturing, how selfless, how accommodating she could be. But solitude rewrites that story. It reminds her that nurturing herself is not selfish. It's the foundation of all genuine love. The more she pours into her own soul, the more she realizes that love isn't something you give to get. It's something you overflow with naturally when you are full. This fullness radiates in quiet ways. She no longer forces conversations that drain her. She no longer keeps doors open out of guilt. Her energy becomes intentional. Her no is not cold, it's clean. Her yes is not needy, it's conscious. Every boundary she sets now carries grace, not bitterness, because she no longer sets boundaries to keep people out. She sets them to keep her peace in. In this state of grounded power, she becomes deeply attractive, but not in the way the world defines attraction. Hers is not the beauty of constant accessibility or effortless charm. It's the beauty of stillness, the allure of a woman who can sit in silence without fear, who doesn't seek validation through visibility. She's magnetic because she is centered, because she no longer chases. Alan Watts would have said she has stopped trying to hold water with her fists. She lets life flow. Relationships come and go. People appear and disappear, but her peace remains. This is the paradox of true feminine strength. It looks like softness, but it's unshakable. Psychologically, this is integration. The moment when her sense of self is no longer built around others' perception. She's not reactive anymore. Someone's withdrawal doesn't trigger panic. Someone's praise doesn't inflate her. Her emotions are hers, not puppets pulled by the strings of approval and rejection. This is what modern psychology calls emotional regulation. But on a deeper level, it's spiritual alignment. She has learned the secret that mystics and Stoics alike have whispered for centuries. Nothing external can disturb the one who governs her inner world. The storms may come, but she has built her house on rock, not sand. And now, love returns, not as dependency, but as choice. She's no longer impressed by intensity. She's drawn to consistency. She doesn't need grand gestures. She values presence. She no longer confuses chemistry with compatibility or butterflies with truth. Her attraction has matured. It's no longer a hunger, it's a harmony. Men who meet her now often sense something they can't quite name. They feel both drawn and challenged, drawn to her radiance, challenged by her wholeness. She doesn't demand, she invites. She doesn't chase. She attracts through authenticity. And while some may shrink away, the ones who stay find themselves transformed in her presence. Because the woman who has mastered solitude doesn't enter relationships to complete herself. She enters to co-create. But this power is not loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It exists in the way she walks, the way she breathes, the way she chooses silence over argument. When she smiles, it's not to please, it's to express her inner calm. When she speaks, it's not to convince, it's to connect. She's not playing the game anymore. She's writing her own rules. The modern world will often misinterpret her independence as coldness, her quiet as disinterest, her standards as arrogance. But she's not detached. She's discerning. She has learned that not everyone deserves front row access to her peace. Her love is no longer a door that anyone can walk through. It's a garden with a gate that opens only for those who know how to tend it. And perhaps the most profound revelation of her solitude is this. She's no longer waiting for someone to see her. She sees herself clearly, fully, lovingly. She no longer rushes into connections hoping to be understood. She has made peace with the truth that not everyone will understand her, and that's no longer a wound, it's a filter. She has become her own safe space, her own muse, her own home. There's a certain grace that begins to emerge when a woman no longer resists her solitude, but welcomes it, not as a pause between relationships, but as a living, breathing relationship with herself. It is here in the quiet hum of her own presence that she discovers something few ever truly grasp, that love without self-awareness is merely attachment wearing a mask. She has lived through the storms of seeking, the hunger for validation, the ache of being unseen, the restless scrolling through memories that never felt complete. But now, as she stands in the stillness of her own being, she realizes she no longer needs to be chosen to feel alive. She is already alive. She is already whole. The mirror that once reflected fragments of her now shows her entirety. This woman understands something that both ancient philosophy and modern psychology have always hinted at, that freedom and belonging are not opposites. They coexist in balance when you belong first to yourself. She knows that solitude isn't isolation, it's intimacy with life itself. When she sits alone by a window, watching rain streak across the glass, she feels connected to everything: the rhythm of the drops, the sigh of the wind, the pulse of the earth beneath her. In this state of awareness, she begins to see through illusion. Alan Watts spoke of the game of life, how we take it too seriously, how we mistake our roles for our identity. She begins to unlearn this seriousness. She realizes she doesn't need to perform her femininity to be feminine. She doesn't need to prove her strength to be strong. The woman who thrives alone embodies paradox. She is both delicate and powerful, both yielding and unbreakable, both deeply feeling and infinitely free. There was a time when she mistook emotional availability for vulnerability. Now she understands that real vulnerability is not exposure, it's authenticity. It's the courage to exist without performing. When she feels sadness, she doesn't suppress it. She lets it breathe. When she feels love, she doesn't demand its return. She lets it flow. This surrender isn't weakness. It's alignment with truth. The Stoics would say she has mastered the art of internal control. But what she's really done is dissolve the illusion of control altogether. She doesn't cling anymore, not to people, not to outcomes, not to identity. She moves through life like water, fluid, adaptable, serene. Her peace is not circumstantial, it's constitutional. There's an elegance in how she handles love now. She no longer chases connection. She curates it. When a man enters her life, she doesn't rush to define it. She observes, she allows. She knows that real attraction isn't urgency, it's resonance. She doesn't need fireworks. She seeks fire that warms, not burns. And because she's not desperate for belonging, she belongs everywhere. In a crowded room, she stands grounded. In silence, she feels seen by the universe itself. She has transcended the binary of needing or rejecting love. She simply honors it when it arrives and releases it when it leaves. Love to her is not possession, it's participation. Psychologically, she has achieved what therapists call individuation, the full realization of self beyond external attachment. Spiritually, it's awakening, and energetically, it's liberation. Her solitude has taught her the art of detachment, not cold withdrawal, but loving freedom. She can hold a hand without clinging. She can walk away without resentment. Her beauty now is not in perfection, but in peace. Her confidence doesn't roar, it whispers. She no longer needs to prove that she's strong because strength has become her default. Her softness no longer feels dangerous because she's learned that softness is the highest form of power. She doesn't just exist in the world anymore. She moves through it like poetry, quietly altering everything she touches. People may notice the difference without understanding it. They'll say she's changed, that she's glowing, that her energy feels different. And they'll be right, but it's not magic, it's alignment. She's no longer fragmented between who she is and who she's supposed to be. She's no longer performing femininity for validation or independence for protection. She simply is. And in that being, she's free. Free to love without fear. Free to walk away without guilt. Free to exist without explanation. Her solitude has not made her untouchable. It has made her whole. And when she finally chooses to share her world with someone, it will not be out of emptiness, but overflow. Not to escape loneliness, but to expand love. Because now she knows partnership is not about completion, it's about reflection. She seeks a mirror, not a maker. And if that mirror never appears, she's still radiant. Because the woman who thrives alone doesn't seek a reflection in others anymore. She has become the reflection itself. Comes a sacred calm at the end of the journey. the kind that doesn't arrive with fanfare, but in quiet understanding. The woman who once searched for meaning in the eyes of others now finds it in the still gaze of her own reflection. She's no longer the seeker, she's the found. And in her finding, she realizes that solitude was never the absence of love. It was the purification of it. She no longer mistakes solitude for loneliness. Loneliness was the absence of connection to herself. Solitude is the presence of it. In the beginning, solitude was something she endured. Now it's something she protects. It's the space where her intuition speaks the loudest, where her spirit breathes without interference. In that stillness, she's learned that peace is not passive. It's an act of defiance in a world addicted to distraction. She understands now that love, real love, cannot exist without freedom. Anything that demands she shrink, silence, or surrender her essence is not love, but fear, and she will no longer participate in fear. Her feminine energy, once stretched thin, trying to prove its worth, now gathers inward, rich, radiant, and unbothered. She moves through the world like a poem written by the divine, unhurried, unapologetic, unconcerned with approval. When she interacts with others, she no longer performs. She listens more than she speaks. She feels without explaining. She gives without depleting. And when she loves, she does so with the quiet assurance of someone who knows she has nothing to lose because she has already found everything within. Alan Watts once spoke of the beauty in letting go, how clinging creates suffering, how the river of life cannot be grasped but must be flowed with. She now understands that letting go isn't abandonment, it's alignment. When something or someone drifts away, she doesn't chase. She bows in gratitude for the experience and releases it into its next becoming, because she knows that what's meant for her doesn't need to be held tightly. It moves toward her naturally, like breath returning to lungs. And in that release, she becomes luminous. Her solitude turns into magnetism. Not the kind that seduces, but the kind that awakens. People feel it before they understand it. Her presence makes others slow down, reflect, soften. She no longer draws attention through effort. She commands it through essence. There's something deeply spiritual about a woman who's made peace with her own company. Her energy no longer pleads, "See me." It whispers, "I see." She's not waiting for someone to validate her worth. She embodies it, not through achievements or praise, but through being. Her life becomes her meditation. Every morning routine, every meal alone, every small joy, all of it becomes sacred. She's learned that self-love is not self-obsession. It's self-honoring. It's the daily choice to treat her mind and body as home, not as projects to be fixed. It's eating when she's hungry, resting when she's tired, leaving when she's disrespected, staying when it feels true. It's trusting her intuition without needing permission. And when love enters again, as it inevitably will, she greets it differently. She doesn't lose herself in the current this time. She flows alongside it. She doesn't try to prove her value through giving. She allows herself to receive. She no longer fears being too much because she knows the right heart will never be overwhelmed by authenticity. She has stopped auditioning for roles in other people's stories. She writes her own, slowly, beautifully, deliberately. The paradox is that by mastering solitude, she becomes more capable of love than ever before, because now her love comes from abundance, not absence. She no longer clings to people hoping they'll fill her. She shares her wholeness so they might remember theirs. She no longer fears endings. She honors them as natural transitions in the unfolding of life. And if someone asks her why she's alone, she smiles because she knows she's not. She's in the company of her highest self, her truest essence, her deepest peace. She's surrounded by unseen forces, intuition, purpose, grace, all conspiring to keep her aligned. She's not waiting for life to begin. She's living it fully, consciously, sensually, here and now. To understand the empowerment of solitude is to understand freedom itself. Freedom from needing to be liked, to be chosen, to be anything other than real. It's the end of performing and the beginning of being. And in this final revelation, she becomes the embodiment of serenity, the kind of woman who no longer reaches for love because she is love, the kind of woman who doesn't need to chase attention because she carries presence, the kind of woman who can sit alone in silence and feel the entire universe moving within her. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.